Alright, we have the player tile next. If you click on the plus and go to default, we'll go down to our play. And the player, this is going to be the you can go as simple as a single image tile if you want to for the player. But if you want to try to fit in some of the basic pieces for all of the tile types, this would probably be about the smallest set you could use and still have a lot of the options that are available for them and be able to see it visually when things happen for it. Alright, so we'll go through these, and when it comes to the player, there's a little bit of a difference in terms of how the player is set up. By default, if I click on the player, and then we just go ahead and assign the player type to him, at this point, he's already set up. There are, I forget the number now, there's about 2,000 something animations that can be assigned to the player. Currently, we have the animation rollout disabled because it would take too long to fill out all those animations. It's going to just pre-populate them based on name. That means that the name has to actually be the same name. So when you see these, there is the 000 again for animation, just identifying that the next, if you do a fly idle 001, 2, 3, then this will automatically pick it up and know it's an animation for that one. But for our current character, if you're doing just a very standard one, the move idle is going to be the base tile that you can use across the board. But each one, for instance, there's a climb idle, there's a crouch idle. Those are going to be some of the standard ones you could use for it. Something to remember though is that each one, when you start getting into it, and we'll have a whole list of all the names and labeling conditions and stuff, but there's going to be a climb idle, and it's going to be up, down, left, right, bottom, all those type of different label pieces to it. But the main thing to remember though is that once you assign the player, it's going to have a very basic default player type. We'll go ahead and say player, default player type. What we want to do though is make sure we've set up the player to at least be ready for the standard play. So we're going to make the animation frames go down. We'll choose the thumbnail for the image. And for the general settings, player settings, those are all done. If you want the player to interact in a certain way with collision, you can enable this. The player also has a collider box, a moving box as well. And those we'll just get into more detail when we get like specifics of how the player works. Alright. One other one while we're here, let's go ahead and do this one. Player can be a fog of war unit. So if you're going to have fog of war in, you could enable it just so that the player does have this available. The radius is how big around is the volume. 10 by 10 is the player, so if we did like 30, and then the inner radius, maybe make this about 10. So there's a circle or a square circle that goes around, and then a smaller one inside it. Alright. And then we could say rotate forward if we were using the image, which in this case there is a fog image right there. And by default we'll use a circle when it comes to just the basic shape. This is just in case you decide to use the fog of war and you want to see the player be able to actually interact with it. By having that set in default, then you'll be able to use that. Alright. And then for the other options, there's not too much that you have to worry about in terms of setting up the player unless there's something different. If you want the player to be hurt, so you want to actually be able to make the player get hit, you want to uncheck unlimited health. When it comes to the lives, they'll be down at the bottom, but you also make sure you turn the lives either on or off if you want unlimited or not. Alright, we'll do, so on die we'll turn off the explode. And then the inventory item for player, we want to make sure we enable this. We'll say the Item cost carry limit, we'll make this higher. We'll say like 20 or so for him, so he can carry a lot. Active item limit, we'll just say 1 item at a time. His basic setup, auto switch on items, that works. We don't want to drop them. So we can also say that the player can holster so that if you pick it up, you can also hide it away. Alright. And if we go down to here, we'll see a player and controller. We want to make sure we enable player and controller. We'll use the default first controller settings, 8 direction. General settings, this is on the saying what is the general basis for the character. Go ahead and leave all these on for the basic setup here. Eventually we'll get into a better system on how you can select and disable things for this part. The character type we're saying is either a user AI or none. This one is going to say it's a user, so it's just a player user. Gravity by default is on, direction is negative on the Y, so it's going to be going down. Alright, and then the rest of these should be set up pretty well. Lives, if you want the player to have unlimited lives, and usually, at least when you're testing the first time around, you may want to do unlimited so you can just keep playing the project. Alright, character controller basics is going to be a circle. It's basically a capsule that goes around the player, and you have a height radius and then the center point offset for it. And I would say, at least for now, I would do a walk-through characters, meaning that characters don't collide with each other. It does make for gameplay if you want to use it that way. You can also, if the collider above is on, that'll also work with it. Alright, and then we have all of our options for all the different types of move values and jumps and just a whole bunch of other things that are available for the player. By default, most of the things are enabled, but remember, to make the character interesting, you may want to start the character with just the ability to move, everything else is turned off, and then triggering events to allow players to jump or jump high or dash, or any of those things might come at later points during a game. Alright, so we'll go ahead and go down to the bottom here. Okay, so we get to a spot where there are effects, camera shakes, there's ghosting. This is all going to be part of each state. So every character state you have available, you'll be able to say if you want something specific to happen. So when the player climbs, do you want an animation to occur that's separate of the player? So if you want animation of a powerful, like a power ring going around it, or if you want the player to glow while he's going around it, you can set an animation clip for all 3 states. If they're climbing but they're idle, if they're climbing and they move, or they're moving fast. So 3 different animations that could be called at any point when the player goes to those states. And again, that's going to be the effect that's available for all the states for the player. And that's going to be the same thing for the shake camera. So whenever that happens, same thing for the ghosting, and then also for the audio, same thing for audio. So those 4 right there are going to control a lot of different properties that at this state, or in terms of putting art and content in, it's going to be here. So be sure that if you're making something you want, so if the player is going to run and jump, and when they land, you want a little smoke cloud puff at the feet, then this would be the effects, and you would do effect jump on land right here, and you would apply those animations right there of like a cloud of smoke or a puff or something. Alright. And then the last set that we'll look at for the next part is going to be the AI, and it's going to be setting up the player so that they have a default AI system here, which will also be driven by the player AI system over here. Alright, and that should cover all the main pieces. Yeah, everything else, all the rest of these will be a different take to look at.